to start. Okay, so we have Danielle here today, and Danielle is awesome. She is the Green Schoolyards Program Manager at Open Lands and works with schools, communities to design green schoolyards and active school gardens. Danielle knows that when children connect to nature and gardening, it helps with their well-being, and that ensuring access to nature and environmental wellness are issues of race, gender, and class-based justice. Danielle was a program coordinator for DePaul's Community Peacemakers program, organizing college students to facilitate social justice conversations and projects with high school students. Danielle is a trained tree keeper, peace circle facilitator, and technology participation facilitator. With that, I will let you take it away.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Can y'all hear me all right? Okay, perf. All right, so before I get started, and we're going to be talking about native plants today, I just wanted to pause because I know there's a lot of grief going on in the world and in our personal lives. And so if people are comfortable, I would like to lead us in a little reflective, meditative moment. So if you're comfortable, feel free to close your eyes and get grounded in your space and just get comfortable. I know some of us might be working on some other projects while tuning into the Zoom call. Feel free to just pause what you're doing for a second to take some time for yourself. And we're just going to do a breathing exercise real quick where we're going to breathe in for 4 seconds. Then we're going to hold it for 7 and then breathe out for 8. I'm going to guide y'all through it. So whenever you're ready, we're going to breathe in for 4 seconds. So inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold it. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And release. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So now that we got the hang of that, we're going to do it again. All right, so let's breathe in for 4, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then exhale. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And feel free to breathe in your own time. And you can keep your eyes closed. And I want us to tune into our hearts for a second. And see if you can even call to mind a love from someone important in your life, whether it's an ancestor, a good friend, or even the earth, because the earth got you. And so we're just going to hold that in our hearts for a second. And we're going to do that breathing exercise again. We're going to inhale that love. 2, 3, 4. Hold it. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then we're going to release to the other people in the Zoom land. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes again, maybe stretch a little bit. Cool. Thank y'all for engaging in that with me. So now we can talk a little bit about native plants now that we've hopefully cleared our minds and our hearts a little bit. So I'm going to share my screen. I almost forgot how to share my screen in Zoom. It's been a while. Let's see. Okay, I think you're going to have to stop sharing your computer sound, Elizabeth. Is that okay? I'm going to take you off of that. All righty. So, native plants. So I call this presentation Flower Power because I'm corny. And also I think that flowers have so much power. But also native plants aren't just flowers. A lot of them are. But native plants can be used for medicine, for flavor, and also for so many ecological purposes. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So first, I want to ask y'all, what is a native plant? So feel free to drop in the chat or even come off of mute and just share with us what comes to mind when you think of this term, native plant. And Elizabeth, I'm going to ask you to monitor the chat, please. Thank you.
Happy to do that. Nothing coming in the chat as of right now. Anyone want to unmute themselves and share what they think a native plant is? I know you all know.
Okay. Am I on mute?
Yeah, you unmuted.
You hear me?
Share?
You hear me, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right. You know, is 2 + 2 really equal 4? But I'm not even going to go into that. I suppose it's a plant that's really kind of native, indigenous, like how the baobab tree is kind of indigenous to Alkebula in Africa. But, and then, you know, we got like, I do like the swamp, the prairie milkweed, the mom grass that grows down there on the, but at the end of the day, how many thousands of years, millions of years as seeds been coming from another region and like coming to a place like America, Europe, where the weather was a little bit more conducive to grow these things. But at the end of the day, we talking about what's kind of indigenous to the area. For example, in Illinois, the bunchberry, which I think is becoming, it's less of those berries that it's indigenous to kind of the Midwest, but preferably to Illinois. And I'm gonna just leave it at that when we talk about native, you know. But okay, anyway, sorry.
Danielle, we also had someone put in the chat, natural to the environment.
Yeah, that's great. Thank y'all for sharing. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else wanted to share before I start sharing what I was going to share.
There's a couple more in the chat. Oh, go ahead, Nathan.
Oh, I'd just say prairie flowers and grasses. You know, like Illinois wetlands, you know. So original.
Right on. Cool. Well, thank y'all, everyone who shared, because y'all are all correct. So a native plant is a plant that is originally from a certain place. So most plants are native to somewhere. I mean, if you're talking about like a lot of our vegetables, they might have been slowly evolved or engineered to be what they are now, but that's not that. We're not getting into all that. We're talking about plants that are in their mostly original form and are from a certain type of place. So for example, this plant right here, false indigo, is a native plant to this area, but like Robert said, there's obviously other plants that are native to other areas. So thinking about that plant being from its original place, it has evolved to be used to certain weather patterns. So oftentimes there will be perennials and they'll come back every year. Or they will have certain systems like they'll seed in a certain type of way that makes them come back every year. And also with that, that means that these plants have evolved alongside people over a long time. So people have been using these plants for dyes, food, medicine, all different types of things. So one of the great things about native plants is that you can plant them for multiple uses. And I think a lot of the permaculture people, correct me if I'm wrong, y'all, call this stacking functions. I don't know a lot about permaculture, but I think that's what they be saying. So a great thing about native plants, like I mentioned, is that it can be food or medicine for you, but also food for wildlife as well, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Also, stormwater capture. A lot of native plants have certain type of root systems that help them to capture water, and also they can help build soil. And I know Dr. Akila is here, so I'm not going to act like I'm the soil expert when she's in the room. So if you wanted to add anything, Dr. Akila, about that, feel free, as we are in this space today. I would love your expertise in the room. So just kind of going into some of those things, I wanted to talk about native herbs. And so these are just some examples. So one of them is anise hyssop, which you might have seen. You can see it in a lot of parks alongside the river or just in the prairie areas in parks. And this is an herb that has a very sweet flavor and aroma. And some people say it's kind of like licorice and also has similar properties to the licorice plant in terms of how you might utilize it as an herb. So for example, a lot of people use it when they have like a sore throat or excess mucus, and it's very, very soothing when you have a sore throat or if you're going to be talking for a long time. Like today, I got my little anise hyssop tea going to help me to make sure that my throat is coated as I'm speaking to y'all. It's also part of the mint family. So if you're seeing a plant that looks kind of similar to this, like other mint family plants, it'll have a square stem. So you can kind of help identify it in that way. Also, bees really love it. So you might see like hundreds of bees just in an area like this because they really love these kinds of colors, like these light purples, indigos, and also like very columnar structures. They love those. Then the next plant, also bees love this one, bee balm, or other people call it wild bergamot. This one has more of like an oregano flavor to it. So if you were to harvest this, you could also kind of use it in the similar way you would use oregano, flavor-wise, but also medicinally. So this is really good for if you have colds and flus to help kind of cleanse your system, kind of that antiviral activity that oregano has. I would say the flavor is a little more, I don't want to say abrasive, but it was a little more potent than oregano is, in my personal opinion. And then we have yarrow. Yarrow is a really great plant for, especially in your herbal first aid kit. So if you are in the prairie and for some reason I don't know, you trip on a stick or something, and then you scrape your knee and you start bleeding. Yarrow is really good for helping to stop bleeding. And also for if you're having menstrual issues where you're experiencing excessive bleeding or you're trying to help blood move through the body, yarrow is good for kind of like both of those things. If you're having like a hard time circulating blood, but also for helping to prevent too much bleeding from occurring. It's also great for fevers. And people have also utilized this as a protective herb. So people in kind of like folklore would have you take a bunch of yarrow and put it in a little bag and put it in your pocket for a pocket of protection. And people have also kind of like used all three of these herbs for spiritual purposes and smoke cleansing and things of that nature. So getting into some of the ecological things, a lot of native plants are really great as host plants for different species of insect and also birds and whatnot. But I just wanted to share kind of some caterpillar, butterfly, moth species that really love some of the native plants in our area. So you might have heard of monarchs and milkweeds, which is a really great host plant species relationship to study, especially because milkweeds are like the only plant that monarch butterflies lay their eggs on, which when I found that out, I was just kind of like, but why though? Like there's so many plants, but that's just what they've done over thousands of years. So what we gonna do is we gonna plant the milkweed because that's what they eat and that's what they lay their eggs on. And so then what happens is the little monarch caterpillars will become toxic to any predators that'll try to eat them. So any birds that would eat a monarch caterpillar that looks very enticing might struggle. And then other species have evolved. I think it's the viceroy butterfly. It looks very similar to the monarch. So then they appear to also be poisonous. So they're just kind of, you know, mimicking and blending in for survival purposes, which is understandable. Then to the right of that, we have the black swallowtail butterfly, which really likes the golden Alexander plant, which I actually just learned this. We also, a lot of us might know that swallowtail butterflies love things like dill and parsley and things in the carrot family. But they also love a lot of native plants. So golden Alexander, to me also, I noticed that this looks a lot like a dill or a fennel flower. So hopefully that's helps it to be a little easy to remember for folks who already kind of know that they like those types of plants. Then going down here to, I don't know how you say this moth, y'all, the fritillary. I've seen it, don't know how you say it, but their host, one of their host plants is the violet plant, which is a native plant. A lot of us consider it to be a weed or an invasive species, and a weed or an invasive species, well, I'll say a weed is just a plant that you don't want in your garden. So almost anything can be a weed. An invasive species is something that will just completely take over your garden. I wouldn't consider violets to be either one of those, but that's just me. Y'all make your own decisions. But violets are also really great for supporting the lymphatic system. So if you got violets in your yard, feel free to make a little violet tea. But I think also it's one of those plants where if you make a tea out of it and then it has kind of like that purplish color and you add a lemon to it, it'll change in color. So I don't know if anyone's tried that before, but let us know in the chat or let us know how you utilize these plants. And then the beautiful tiger swallowtail butterfly host plant is the pawpaw tree. If you have had a pawpaw before, describe it in the chat for those of us who might not have been able to experience such a wonder. I've had it for the first time last year and it was something. It was quite something. I think it is one of the largest fruits that is native, I think it is the largest native fruit to the area. Correct me if I'm wrong, people who know more. But yeah, pawpaw trees, delicious, nutritious, and hopefully we can all plant more of them. All right, so now I want to talk a little bit about oak trees. So oak trees are native. There's a lot of native oak trees to our area, such as the white oak, red oak, black oaks. There's a lot of different oaks that are native to our areas. Oaks are really, they're kind of like the OGs, kind of like the queens of supporting wildlife in the natural world. So for example, they support over 900 species of caterpillars, which is really important because caterpillars are the food source for over 90% of songbirds. And then, so they're really big contributors to our food web. And then they support over 600 different, I don't even know how y'all say this word either, that word, which is mostly like sawflies, small wasps, ants, and sometimes bees as well. And then from a stormwater perspective, oak trees can absorb at least 100 gallons of water a day, which is really impressive. And then I think they can transpire over 40,000 gallons of water a year, helping to cool the air. And I mean, if your oak tree gets this big, just like imagine how much you might be saving on your heat bill because it's a lot of shade. But that's a pretty big oak tree. But you can still have oak trees on your in your street. What do you call that? On the street. And then I wanted to also highlight goldenrod, which is often in bloom around September, October. those super yellow flowers are super good for people have been using them for dyeing things and also for medicines. And a lot of times you can see that a lot of native medicine presents itself when it's the most opportune time. So just kind of going back a little bit, violet comes up in the spring, which is really good for helping to your lymphatic system and kind of like your detoxification system to help kind of like bring you back to life after that winter time. Things like goldenrod are coming around the fall time to kind of help your immune system. And then just going back to the ecological piece, goldenrods are really great for both native bees and caterpillars, where a lot of plants kind of are more of a one or the other type of thing. And then also a very underrated source of pollen for monarch migration. So a lot of times when monarchs are going back, this is like their main source of pollen, both goldenrods and asters, which you'll see oftentimes growing alongside each other. Cool. All right, so getting started with your native garden. First, you got to assess your space. And you probably wouldn't actually plant in a raised bed like this. This is the wrong picture for this slide, but disregard. So first you have to ask yourself, how much space do you have? How much sunlight do you get in the space that you have? What kind of soil texture do you have? What's the wind looking like? And what is the purpose that you want for your native garden? Whether you want a rain garden, you're trying to attract pollinators, you're growing for herbs, or you're growing for shade. So this is the Illinois Native Plant Guide. I'm gonna drop a link in the chat after I'm done with the presentation for this. This is what I use when I'm trying to decide when I'm trying to help people figure out what plants should go where. And this, this is a little, I know it looked like a lot, but it has all the different plants here. And then I don't know if y'all can see my mouse, but it'll show like throughout the season when it's blooming. And then it'll show like what kind of sunlight needs there are, how tall it gets, how much space you'll need, what kind of moisture it needs, and also what kind of soil it needs. And then it also talks about where you'll naturally find such a plant. And then if you're interested in pollinators such as bees or butterflies or even hummingbirds, which plants are good for those? And then also if they're drought tolerant. So I know sometimes we can have a tough time getting those plants watered, or for whatever reason, our soil doesn't hold water well. It's good to know kind of like how, what plants might be a little more resilient to that. And then when to plant native plants. So you can start planting the actual plant itself in the spring after Mother's Day. I prefer to plant native plants in the fall, starting in September up until the frost, because the plants are already kind of starting to go into dormancy, which makes them, I've noticed, more resilient than trying to plant something in the spring and then trying to get them as much water as possible. So I personally recommend planting in the fall. But you know, if y'all are excited about getting your native garden together after today, then who am I to stop you? Go ahead after this weekend and plant you some native plants. But I would say the sooner the better, so you can get them established and get them watered before it gets really hot outside. And then if you're planting by seed, I would recommend planting those seeds starting in the fall through the end of February. So native plant seeds oftentimes need about 30 days of cold before they can really start to grow. So you don't want to wait too late. So this is actually not really the best time to plant native seeds. Some people will put their seeds in the refrigerator, and you could try that, and it works for a lot of people. So you know, you can try that too. A little experiment. And then caring for your native garden, it's important, just like with any garden, you got to keep your seeds moist for them to come through. And then you want to water your seedlings once a week, at least. But you know, check on your plants and see how they're doing. But you want to definitely give them water once a week. Twice a week is probably ideal. And then that mulch is going to be really important because one, it's going to help regulate the temperature for the soil around your plants. So it's going to help your plants be more resilient to the heat in the summertime and the cold in the wintertime. And then it's also going to add organic matter to the soil. Yes, and nutrients and all that stuff. And then weeds. Okay, so there are some plants that are super aggressive for the native garden. I should have had a picture of it, but if anyone's seen bindweed, if you see anything that is starting to wrap around your plant that you didn't plant, you gotta get that out of there. And the best way to do that is to just kind of keep cutting it back underneath or pulling as much of the root out as possible, but that bindweed is really persistent. And so that's probably like the main one. And you probably also don't want thistle in your garden. Those two, I think, are kind of the most the ones that I have seen be the struggle the most for native gardens. But also, like I said before, whatever you consider to be something you don't want in your garden, you don't have to have it in your garden. But even here, like in this picture on the right, those are milkweeds. A lot of people consider milkweeds to be weeds, even though they are the plant that monarch butterflies rely on so heavily. So, you know, it's up to you. But you don't want anything to overrule your native garden. Oh wait, there was I thought I had something in here that shows like how deep native roots can go. So I'm just gonna talk about that real quick, my bad. So a lot of native plant roots can go up to 15 feet deep. So what that does is that helps native plants to capture a lot of water because those roots are creating all these little systems, all these little networks in the soil that water can trickle down into, and then that helps them to hold on to that water. And it's really important with climate change, and we've seen so many more heavy storms as of late. We're going to see even heavier storms as the climate keeps changing. So native plants and trees, rain barrels, those types of things are really good to help us become a little more climate resilient. And then also when those native roots, and Dr. Akila, feel free to chime in, those native roots, when they go so deep into the soil, they're adding organic matter into the soil, which helps to build the soil. And which is really important since we're losing so much soil through agriculture and development and all those things. I think that was everything I wanted to share. So if anyone has any questions or ideas or anything, let me know. I'm gonna stop sharing now.
Thanks, Danielle. Did anyone have any questions? Not, I have plenty, but I want to make sure you all have a chance to ask your questions first. So one of my first questions is about, I guess like about the planting process. If I go out and buy a bunch of seeds and just like throw them in the yard, is that like a productive, useful way to have more native plants grow in my space?
You mean like in your grass?
Yeah, in the grass, in the soil. Just is that like, you said do it in fall, but if I went out tomorrow because I have some seeds and I want to see what happens, like, is that going to be most helpful, or is it going to be most helpful to actually plant it strategically using seedlings?
I personally would recommend, if you wanted to get native plants in your garden this season, to get the seedlings to plant. If you wanted to plant seeds because you know you just are a seed planter and that's how you like to garden, I would recommend putting your seeds in the refrigerator for 30 days, and then planting them. Some people, I think they'll put it in like a moist paper towel or something like that. And feel free, if anyone else has more experience with that, share what you've done. But if you really wanted to plant seed, I would recommend doing the 30-day refrigerator thing.
Awesome.
Oh, sorry.
did-
And then I would
no,
also recommend, oh, sorry. I'm gonna go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead. And then I would recommend against planting in the grass because there's already, especially if your grass is really like abundant, because those grass roots are already in competition with each other. So your native roots, your native seeds are probably going to struggle in that environment. If you could maybe take out your grass, because also grass has very shallow roots where, I mean, this is just me, y'all. Grass isn't the most ecologically friendly thing for us to grow. So the more grass we can take up, the more climate resilient we'll be. But that's on you. I know that grass is really great, especially if you have like dogs and kids to run around. But feel free to take that grass up if you want to plant some native plants in there. Oh, and then someone said something about winter sowing. That's the method where a lot of people take like a milk jug and some soil, and then the milk jug is kind of acting as this like greenhouse in a way, but also helping the plants to acclimate to the different weather changes. I've actually never tried it, but I've heard great things about it. I don't know, Kara, if you wanted to share any about your experience with that, but it seems to be really successful.
Yeah, this was my first year doing it, and I did about 30 jugs, and I only had 2 that didn't work. So it was and it was so easy.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe I'll try and find a resource on how to do winter sowing. And right now I'm pulling up the for people who are interested in that native plant guide. But yeah, if anyone else has anything they'd like to share in the meantime.
David Painter, the guy, he was a steward at Montrose, down there at Montrose Harbor, and my Leslie Bournes. Couple of things. It is a personal relationship with your garden, but we usually do our planting in the fall for whatever reason over the past 35 years down at the dune. Even those black oaks that we did, and those were from open land, we did plant those in the fall. But it does not negate that. But I'll sow stuff any day of the year. But and that's just me. So it's just striking the right balance. And at the end of the day, you are doing something really good for the environment. And one of the interesting things with restoration, oh, by the way, I agree, grass, man. If it's not native grass, just get rid of it. Well, anyway, that's just my own personal thing again. But yeah, things down. One of the things too we find out is that things pop up from the things you grow there. There are orchid and things that pop up out of the ground that were like 2,000 years old. I mean, right down there in the dune area. And by the way, it has changed significantly. The water is also encroaching. I mean, it's coming right up to Lakeshore Drive in a matter of, I don't know when.
Thanks, Robert. Any questions that have come up?
Hi all. Yeah, I have a question, a little bit of a story. I've been nursing, I guess, a little native garden in my mom's backyard for a few years, and it wasn't vacant land when we started. There was like a huge invasive patch of like buckthorn and daylilies. And the buckthorn was pretty easy to like get rid of, but like no matter how many like kind of these like native flowers and you know, some of the plants that you described, like we put in the ground, you know, that those daylilies come back every year. And the one thing we learned kind of the hard way about, you know, some of these native plants is that it takes so long to grow. Like they will start seedling size and they'll still be seedling size like 2 years later. Maybe the soil's just kind of lame, but no, they just kind of take a while to like proliferate. And so just to make sure like if you're doing this, to keep an eye on like what grows there. I mean, if you're just only getting rid of like some like crappy lawn grass or sod, like yeah, you won't have to worry about like the weeds. But like whatever you think is a weed in your garden that or you think it will outcompete these native plants, just make sure that you kind of beat them back. Or if anyone has any tips on how to yeah, just kind of like more effectively, you know what I mean, kind of like mulch and kind of crowd control the area where these yeah, precious plants can grow.
Yeah, I can say in terms of mulch, I think at the best time there's some things to consider that you might have already been doing, but for you know, class reasons and stuff. The best time to mulch is, well, it's never too late to mulch, but the best time to mulch is kind of like mid-April to now mid-May, maybe into June, because that's when everything is starting to pop up. So if you're already familiar with your garden and the undesirables, you can kind of start to smother them if that's the method that you want to use. And then also, you know, some things, you know, you just got to keep pulling. I do know those daylilies can be pretty persistent. And then Malik asked a question, what do I do with unwanted plants? And in the case of daylilies, low-key, a lot of people like daylilies. Maybe those are some plants that could be redispersed in a highly controlled environment that's not going to continue to kind of basically like colonize somebody else's garden. But also if depending on the plant, the best thing to do is to put it in a very dark, like a black plastic bag. Unfortunately, you know, we like to be eco-friendly around here, but if it's like a bindweed situation, you know, that black plastic is gonna help to overheat and kill that plant. But you definitely don't want to necessarily compost certain things, especially if they might have seeds on them or if the roots are on there. So if they are, you want to get that black plastic. Because you also don't want that growing in your compost heap. Yeah, if other people have ideas, because I think avoiding using herbicide is great because it is highly toxic and can give you cancer and things like that. So yeah, doing as much hand pulling as you can.
Yeah, it's pulling and then smothering, yeah, main tactics. But no, it's gone pretty well. Those goldenrods have got up to good size. It's just kind of like a slow process, you know, because it was all like a 10 by 10, 10 by 20 patch of like daylilies. And like now it's like half native, but it's still a process. So it just takes a while doing this work.
It's definitely a process, and being patient with yourself and with the earth and what it can do, you know, hopefully that helps. Karen asked what kind of native plants grow in the shade. Off the top of my dome, I know that columbine is a really popular plant for shade. And just thinking about kind of like if you were in just thinking about different habitats that different native plants live in. So a lot of times we're thinking about prairie plants and swamp plants, but also like an oak savanna where you'll have like the forest thing going on, but then you also got like those plants on the in-between. So we're thinking about what's the in-between. And so a lot of times columbines are in that realm, and they thrive the best in a little bit of shade. But also looking at the chart, oh, I don't have the chart pulled up anymore. But yeah, look at the chart. I'm sure there's other ones that are pretty good. But yeah, columbine is the first one that comes to my mind. Oh, and I think geraniums, a lot of geraniums do well in shade as well.
I have a question. So there's a trend going on TikTok, and people are kind of swapping out grass for clover. Is that something that is okay here in the state? Is that, is it gonna, I don't want it to colonize other plants, but something that I might entertain if it's something that can benefit the land. And thank you so much. I've been learning a lot.
I love that you asked that. Me personally, I'd say yes. I think that's great because I don't think that native plants are the end all be all for like ecological benefit, which I know like so a lot of conservationists sometimes are like, we should only be planting native plants. But then also if you think about like climate change and things like that, like a lot of people are advising us to plant things that grow in St. Louis or wherever. So I'm not a native plant purist, so I think it's about like what is the benefit to the land. And so things like clover and other cover crops are going to be adding nutrients and nitrogen into the soil. And also with clover, that's gonna be attracting pollinators. Clover is also an herb, great for menstrual issues. So I think it's thinking about like, what's the benefit of grass? Which the benefit of grass is, or like the grass that we plant for our lawns is, I would say, low compared to something like clover or what the other things that they consider to be good for like a cover cropped lawn. And that's also something that I don't know a ton about, but I want to learn more. So if other people know more about it, please share. Oh no, I'm sorry, Karen. Yeah, sometimes the dogs, they do their thing in the yard.
Yeah, my yard looks kind of funky right now because I'm trying to design it so that it kind of looks natural. And last year I did not have them go into the backyard at all when I planted the clover, and it was beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. But this year they've run down the middle, and so the clover is kind of along the outskirts, so it looks really weird. But there's lots of worms that come up, so I guess it's doing its job.
That's awesome. Yeah, we do what we can do.
So, given that Chicago Grows Food does most of our work with container gardens, is adding native plants to containers a good idea, a bad idea? Could you incorporate them with the produce that you're growing?
That's a great question. And let me also kind of go back to like why Chicago Grows Food is doing something on native plants. Because I forgot to even say something about that. So one of the most important things for our gardens is pollinators. So in order for us to get any type of fruiting, anything like whether it's tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, we need our pollinator friends to help us with that. And native plants are one of the best, especially flowering native plants are one of the best things that we can plant to help attract pollinators and other beneficial insects such as wasps that can attack your horned worms and things like that. So native plants kind of helps us to have an ecosystem around our edible garden that supports our edible garden. Okay, so going back to the containers. So a lot of native plants have really deep roots, but there are some that don't go that deep. I would say the best thing to do would to be to get as large of a container as possible, at least 5 gallons. And how Chicago Grows Food uses the grow bags, that would be much better than like a plastic container or even a terracotta container, because the plants will do some air pruning, like the roots will start to kind of go through the bag and start to prune itself once the roots go through the bag, which helps it to kind of prune itself. And this is something also that I don't know a ton about, but what I do know is it's better than a harder container for something like a native plant. And I would just recommend, I'm trying to think of some things I would recommend. I've grown anise hyssop and yarrow in containers with some success. But I wouldn't try something like, I wouldn't grow like an oak tree in a container, or I wouldn't grow like a black-eyed Susan or something that I know has really deep roots. I wouldn't grow in something like that. But a lot of things that have, or I wouldn't also do like echinacea or something like that that has like a deep taproot. So yeah, I don't know if I answered that effectively. That's something I'm also still trying to learn. So
No, that was great. And I think also then something for us to experiment with. So if you are adding native plants to your garden, please let us know. We want to learn more. Robert, are you trying to share something? I can't tell. We'll give him a chance. Robert, I think you realized he was muted.
You hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Listen up. People, if we talking about this whole restoration thing, getting into this movement, we need to make, like, for example, native plants like the bergamot, some of the ones that I grow, I make sure a neighbor or somebody get it to put into the ground, because the old root system, and then it need that. It need the room to move around. So we need to do a better job on that. For example, I'm doing ISOP. I love Black Eye Susan, Echinacea in grow bag, but we do need to do just a better job to transition them. I don't care if it's out there in the prairie or whatever, okay? Thanks.
Awesome, thanks. Any final thoughts, Danielle?
Let's talk, Danielle. We need
Yeah,
to talk. Cause
yes.
all your schools want native this, and they want like big old garden out in the yard. All your schools. Okay?
Absolutely. I'm always down to talk about native plants or just plants in general. And I guess if there's anything to take away, obviously, like I am someone who is constantly learning about native plants. So thank you for other people who have been sharing, and I'm glad that we can learn together. And I hope that people can find ways to incorporate them in their spaces or in their lives. If you don't have the space for a native garden, hopefully you can develop a relationship with native plants that are around you at the parks or at the lake or in the forest or wherever. And yeah, native plants are great. Oh, and I will say, after the first year or two, after you've watered it and everything, it kind of takes care of itself. That's one of the biggest perks, is that it'll just do its thing. But you just got to give it that love in that first year. And then if there's like a drought, give it some water. But for the most part, they are adapted to be resilient. And that's the whole thing. It's like they're native to the area, they're native to the weather and the nature here. So yeah.
Nature is a bad woman. She balances out everything. We are the only invasive species, by the way, and the most destructive. Don't get me going.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Big round of applause. This was super informative. I'm excited to
I like that.
try and wait for the fall to plant everything. I put a bunch of links in the chat. So Community Food Navigator shared with me some resources for wildflower meadow volunteer days. So if you want to get your hands in the soil, it's really healthy. It's really therapeutic to be in that space. Check out the Chicago Park District link. If you want to learn more about open lands or space to grow, I put the link for the Open Lands website in the chat. As always, we will be continuing this conversation on Community Food Navigator. I'll give them, I think we'll have time for them to give it their quick spiel. Check them out, follow the link, get on it if you're not already. Remember to like look at it. That's the hardest part of it, is to actually remember to go back. But once you're in it, you're off the other platforms way more, and it's such a great community. And lastly, please, please, please share your thoughts on these events. We want to know what else you want to learn about. We want to know how to make them better, to avoid things that we're doing wrong, all of the above. Thank you so much for being here. Does someone from Community Food Navigator want to just give a 2-minute spiel on the app?
Yeah, I can go ahead. Hi everyone, Israel. I'm the online community manager at the Navigator. And yeah, for those of you who might not know, we were an organization kind of created as a response to a need expressed by a lot of growers, especially growers of color in Chicago, who wanted a space where it was safe for folks to share resources, ideas, especially solutions to problems that folks had to come up with because government and other larger entities were not doing their job at supporting these communities and the growers in them. And so this space is protected for folks to be able to kind of talk about whatever they need to talk or share resources that maybe they want to keep within the community in a sense. But Chicago Grows Food, Elizabeth kind of leads one of the groups in there, the container gardening group. So if you have any questions or thoughts about the discussion today and you want to keep the conversation going, I would encourage you to go there. If you're not in the Navigator and you want to join, just send me an email and I'll send you an invite. Yeah, because it's invite on. But or if you know someone who's in it, they can also invite you. Once someone's in, they can invite. But yeah, I mean that's the gist of it. I'm excited to always excited to attend these calls and yeah, excited to hear more of the conversations going forward.
Thanks, Israel. Thank you all so much. Have great afternoons. Hopefully you get outside, enjoy the weather, plant some stuff, and I'll hang out for a couple more minutes if you have any questions or concerns or just want to chat with Chicago Grows Food.